Virginia. Hitchhiked his way across the Ohio. Bought himself a big black car, blew some minds near and far. Said, hey, bud, flying high with the Mothman. Said, hey, pal, flying high with the Mothman. From way up in the canyon, acting like some kind of Charlie Manson, but he never lost his cool, making ultra-terrestrials drool. Hey, bud, flying high with the Mothman. Said, hey, pal, flying high with the Mothman.
Hi, this is the beginning of part 2 of the Mothman Tour 2002. I'm Andy Colvin here in Seattle. A couple of things I wanted to clear up from part 1 that we didn't have room for on the tape. Harriet did remote view this hillside in Romney that we felt like was the spot, and she did see what appeared to be an underground transfer station, but not a major installation like in Sugar Grove. Speaking of Sugar Grove, did you notice that there was a tape anomaly? That did not occur at any other point in this trip, except when we were right in front of this installation. Perhaps that tape anomaly was caused by some device they were using to monitor, listening device or something. There were also references made in part 1 to a reunion, and just to clarify, that is a high school reunion that Harriet and I were attending. Also, another thing that we forgot to mention in regard to Harriet's dad's car bombing was the fact that the man who came, the FBI man who came to investigate, appears to fit the description of a man in black, because he had odd behavior in that he always paid more attention to Harriet than he did really to like the case, and also he drove a black Volkswagen. And if you know the literature, you find that Keel mentions in one of his talks that the men in black switched from black Cadillacs to black Volkswagens in between 1967 and 1968, which is exactly the time period of the bombing. One thing I wanted to mention about part 1 before we move on is the house, the medieval castle on Woodward Drive that we visited was a house that I used to jog by at night, and I would always hear that woman who people said was a witch playing piano in the middle of the night, and I would often just stand there on the road and listen. One night in particular, I remember meeting Lightning, the Coke can guy that I referred to also. He was a guy who pushed a cart around with Coke cans. But he also was known for having, he was a savant and could do mathematical, really complex mathematical equations in his head, and became quite famous. Was on Ripley's Believe It or Not, traveled, was on talk shows in the 30s. Later in life, he just collected bottles, but he had this intensity about him, and his eyes were just burning. And if I can find a photo, I'll put it in. But he was there one night listening as well, and we made eye contact. And the interesting thing was, it seemed like he was communicating with me telepathically. It was frightening, and I just pushed it out of my mind. But then, in later years, I've now have dreams where I feel that this person is still somehow communicating with me through the astral realm, or at least I have dreams about it. One of the speaking of dreams, one of the Bigfoot dreams that I referred to in part 1 was a dream that my nephew had when he was 3 years old. and he had no concept of a phone at the time. But this was the first time he ever mentioned the telephone, but he said to his mother, "Hey, call Uncle Andy. The big white hairy men have took him away last night." Anything else for part one? No. Bernice Abbott once said that the photographer is the most up-to-date person in society, as the photographer is always turning the now into the past. Zola declared in 1901 that one cannot claim to have really seen something until one has photographed it. But in the Mothman country of central West Virginia, ideas like this are turned upside down as one finds that the past lives on, in the fact that Harriet and Sharon and I were able to go back to this same spot where we had seen things, sort of a magical spot, and that this same energy was still there, still alive, and it shows that there's an interface going on between the human mind and these energies. So these energies aren't apart from us; they seem to be created in conjunction with our own minds. The Mothman teaches us that the paranormal is not really out there, but in us. The only limitation is our imagination. In the land of the Garuda, you can photograph something, but it may not show up on film, unless you use an all-plastic camera like this, which will be less affected by magnetic fields. Here in part two, we travel to the Elk River area of West Virginia, where there were many Mothman sightings. One thing I wanted to explain about the Elk River is that it runs into the Kanawha River, which runs into the Ohio River. So all three of these rivers seem to be connected in that the Mothman was seen on the Ohio, extensively. Also on the Kanawha in the areas of St. Albans and Nitro, which we go to. And also up the Elk River to areas like Clendenin, Harmony, West Virginia, which is where Harriet's mother was born. She also went to Fort Walton High, which is a high school that seems that the intelligence agencies seem to have used as a recruiting ground. What else? There's also, the interesting thing is that the Elk River, where it connects into the Kanawha River, there's a place called Magic Island. It's sort of a sloughing off of the silt. Magic Island has gotten this name for a reason. Strange things happen there. When I had my premonition or my whatever it was, where I felt that someone had been murdered, I felt that it was a drowning, and I had a picture of it being on Magic Island or near there. So for the rest of the trip, I kept avoiding Magic Island. I was sort of afraid to go there for some reason, except on the last night, I did drive by, and I saw emergency vehicles. They were pulling somebody out of the water who had drowned. So there's a little bit of footage of that, but it was at night, so there's not a whole lot. But it seems as if Harriet was correct in that my vision was a premonition of someone drowning, and I even, and I sensed the location of that. There's a long section where we go to California, and Harriet takes courses in hypnotherapy. I also took the courses, but Harriet's life was changed by this phenomenon. After we got back together, she found that her medical intuitive qualities, talents were perfect for hypnotherapy, and she decided, made a big career change, and that's the kind of thing that happens when you follow the trail of the Mothman. Okay. Now, one more interesting thing I wanted to bring up, this sort of a random connection between the WTO protests here in Seattle and the Mothman. I read there's another book about the Mothman that's widely known and read. Other than the John Keel book, there's one by a guy named Loren Coleman, who's a cryptozoologist. Coleman has also written some other books, and in reading one of those books, I found a reference to an address here in Seattle. It basically said, go there if you're a paranormal person, go there and investigate this. It was sort of a list of areas that he couldn't get to, but it was advising others to try out. So I went to that location here in Seattle. It's the only actual address in Seattle, or in the state of Washington, listed. And I found some references that seemed to tie in with the Mothman. I found the quote, "The Big Brother is watching you," which turns out to be something that Harriet's dad always used to say to her. I found the word shadow drawn in the concrete. There was also Masonic symbology there, and the main thing, though, is that there was a drawing of what appeared to be something that could be construed as the Mothman drawn on the door of this particular address. Now, it just so happens that this address is the same spot where, during the WTO protests, police and protesters clashed, and this was sort of the boundary line between the two sides, right at 905 East Pine. Just as a check, I asked Harriet, who had never been there, to remote view a 4-block area in Seattle and see if she could locate which address it was. She did that, and she located 905 East Pine. She also said that it appeared to, in her mind, to have occurred on the 3rd floor of the building. So, a few weeks later, in one of the Seattle tabloids, there was a reference to this building being haunted, and that on the 3rd floor, it had once been used as a music building for the college, that a student had committed suicide on the 3rd floor.
Okay, here we're taking pictures at 905 East Pine, the haunted spot in Seattle. These are just some of the images that are sort of floating around this address. Okay, this is the image on the door at 905. Well, here we are in Flatwoods, site of the sighting. Flatwoods, the site of the famous Braxton County monster sighting. The Green Monster. We're here. Mothman Tour 2002. Choice is yours. Paranormal or normal?
Looks like it could have been normal for this area.
Did you have any? Go ahead.
Actual sighting took place in 1952. There was more than one sighting in the area. We had Sutton, which is down the road, Gasaway, which is a little further to the west, and actually had a dog that died that was exposed to this thing. Several people saw a creature about 7 feet tall, large, dark eyes, and became just violently ill after being exposed to the craft that it stepped out of. Indicative of radiation for those of us who believe.
So do you think this monster is related to your monster?
Yeah, I do. I have the distinct feeling it is.
You think there's an energy field that exists in this area? West
Oh
Virginia?
yeah, oh yeah. It attracts them like flies. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, here we are at what we think is the site of the original sighting here in Braxton County of the Green Monster. Harriet,
Oh,
what do you think?
Got the creepies. It was somewhere off of 19, and I got the creepies.
Somewhere on this farm here, we think. Anyway, any more revelations?
No, except that I feel sick to my stomach, which is sometimes I'll get that if I come through something that's known to be a site of intense radiation.
Maybe we should do a quick rundown of we should do a quick measurement here.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take some readings here, see if we're picking up any high levels of ambient radiation or electromagnetism. Jesus, it's almost off the scale.
Andy, I think we should get out of here. This thing's going nuts.
Well, alrighty, here we are in Gasaway, West Virginia, with some Mothman live soundtrack music. Wasn't there a famous sighting here?
Yeah, about the same time as the one in Flatwoods, there was one approximately 4 days later in Gasaway, and someone also became violently ill and described the same being, and I don't think I know much else about it. So it'd been 1952 also.
What are your mothy senses telling you?
Creepy little town, creepy little town. The big monster was here.
You've been talking about getting a tattoo. Is this the place where you want to get that tattoo? Can you tell us about it?
Well, I don't think Gasway would really have a tattoo shop, but I'm thinking at the end of this whole thing that I had to get something like, maybe on the cheek of my left rump, that says something like the Mothman Tour 2002.
This is the 50-year anniversary of the first sightings.
It is.
Well, here we are in good old Roane County, West Virginia, land of the psychic CIA women. You have an interesting story about your aunts who grew up here.
Yeah, my mom's one of 11. There are 7 girls and 4 boys in the family, and they all went to Walton High School. And my mom just kind of offhand, out of nowhere, a couple weeks ago mentions that her life would have been totally different had she taken that job with the FBI. And I said, what? And then she tells me that she was only 16 when she graduated from high school, and that her parents would not let her go off to Washington, D.C. by herself. And then I find out that my other aunts that worked in Washington, my Aunt Barbara, who's now deceased, and my Aunt Joanne, who worked initially for the Department of Agriculture and then for the CIA, were also recruited out of Walton High School.
Any other aunts and uncles ever recruited out of there? Brother?
They all ended up, a couple more ended up working for the government, but I don't know so much that they were recruited in high school. They were recruited in college. That would be the one that was ahead of the China Lake Naval Weapons Reserve, was recruiting in college.
Well, here we are in Clendenin, site of a famous Mothman sighting. And your stomach is giving you psychic mothy vibes.
Indeed it is. Sighting took place late November or early December 1966. It is documented. I just can't tell you at the time which of those dates it is. And it was around the time of the first wave of sightings in Point Pleasant. There's also one in St. Albans the very same day.
So what is it about all these sightings appear to have taken place on the Elk River.
Yeah, there's definitely something to the Elk River, which is something you brought up, and you're right, because I can feel it.
And when you have your astral projection remote viewing dreams, you dream a lot about the Elk River.
I do.
And you dreamed about it before you ever saw these certain parts of it that we've seen on this trip.
I do, and I did. It's very interesting because something we've already covered in a neighborhood that I've been flying around and projecting around in forever and writing to you about. I'd never been in that neighborhood, and it's all looking down on the Elk River, which is a point you just made clear to me. I didn't kind of realize that. But I've told you about seeing the river, the highway, not knowing it was the Elk River.
Well, here we are in Walton, West Virginia, the heart of Roane County. Any theories on why the CIA and the FBI and the NSA and whoever else, why they come to this town to recruit people?
That's a good question. Maybe, I don't think it's just to offer them a better life away from here. I really don't. I think they're picking and choosing very willfully here, because I think that maybe they're picking people to be mind controlled or something, and people here would never suspect something like that. And I should say too that politically, everyone in my mom's family is just so far to the right that it's not even funny.
Just how far right are they?
They're so conservative. They don't believe that the government should help with anything or anybody. There should be no social programs. Everybody's on his own. They're pro big business. They don't care what kind of an ass of a Republican might be in office. They'll support him just because he's a Republican.
This seems even better. How is it?
I could die and my life would be complete.
Chicken fried steak. Now, the amazing thing about this chicken fried steak, Harriet, is that you can cut it with a cheap plastic fork. Look at this. Did the CIA have advanced knowledge? I think so. Here we are in Dunbar, West Virginia, underneath the interstate. Right above us is where there was a famous Mothman sighting. 1966. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, actually, it wasn't the Mothman. A man, a very religious man, as the story goes in Keel's book, got a surprise when he was going to work one day. A spaceship landed in front of him, and a person got out of it. And this happened approximately 10 miles west of Charleston, which is right where we are on the Dunbar Bridge.
What was it? What did the guy see exactly? What kind of craft was it?
It was an egg-shaped craft with 3 legs, tripod type of landing, and it landed within 50 yards of him, but he did approach it and get closer, and had a real hard time dealing with the whole thing.
Wasn't he a gas line?
Yeah, he worked for
guy?
the gas company. Yeah. And had a real respectable job, really religious man, and had a hard time dealing with the whole thing and couldn't tell anybody for a while.
Now that we're here in this spot, are you picking up anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am. Wasn't the first time this area's been visited, and won't be the last.
Do you get a feeling that this craft was related to the actual Mothman creature that was seen on the Elk River?
All that stuff is related. All of that phenomenon is related, whether it be the Mothman, Stickman, UFOs, whatever type of strange paranormal experience. I feel it's all related.
Okay, we're in between Dunbar and St. Albans, and there was actually a Mothman sighting in Dunbar. There was the UFO sighting that we just talked about, but there was also a Mothman sighting too. Didn't it land on someone's house?
Yeah,
near here?
In Dunbar, it was sitting on somebody's front porch. It was a family's front porch, and there's also a sighting down the roads in St. Albans. Both these sightings took place just right off of 60. And the one in St. Albans, it was actually sitting on a woman's roof. It's got the sign Dale on.
Mothman Tour 2002 continues at the Colvin homestead. Harriet's feeling the forces already.
Big time, big time.
Here's the area where my sister claims a UFO landed in 1952. So you're feeling overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm shivering.
It's 95 degrees and Harriet is shivering.
You're getting a sense that Loretta was visited?
Yeah. Her dreams are actually memories.
Harriet is sensing an animal presence.
Here we are at the scary ravine that everyone agrees is scary.
I associate this definitely with Sharon, and it's not from what she said the other day, because I see her as a child. I'm guessing about 5 or 6 years old. I see her wandering off into here, like she's being summoned. She walked back here by herself.
She sees Sharon wearing a nightgown.
It's got a ruffle around the bottom.
Light pink.
Kind of has like a cinched neck, and it has a bow right here.
That's her gown.
It is?
I remember that. I have a picture of it.
Oh no.
Now this is a spot, Harriet, when I believe I told you I was at my grandfather's house behind you one night in college. We were having a family thing, and I stepped out back by myself and looked this way, and I felt a terrible evil presence, just overwhelming, almost calling me to it, to like disappear into another dimension. That was the feeling I got. Like a David Lynch movie.
It's
It's
evil.
evil. A black helicopter goes over while we're here. Mineral Wells, West Virginia. Here we are. Mothman Tour 2002.
Yeah.
Give us the goods.
Okay, November 2nd, 1966. Right up the road here, a guy by the name of Woody Derenberger had a visitation right on the highway. There were others that confirmed this in police reports. A guy by the name of Mr. Cold stopped to see him on the highway and gave him all types of UFO information, told him where he was from, and told him he'd see him again. And see him again he did several times. And the guy became quite a celebrity with people camping out at his farm in Mineral Wells. And eventually the celebrity that it caused in his life caused him to get a divorce and move away and never be heard of again.
Where was Indrid Cold from?
Lanulos, so he claimed, which is from some faraway galaxy, but I can't remember the name of it, but he claimed he was from Lanulos, and he gave Derenberger lots of information, and also told him that he would have severe physical withdrawal symptoms after he spoke with him, and every time he did, he would have splitting migraines where he'd almost pass out.
And wasn't he flying in a weird craft? Didn't he land in front of the car?
He did land in front of the car, and it looked like a chimney. A stovepipe chimney was what his craft looked like, and there were other people that witnessed this and came forward later after all of this hit the press to verify his story, that did not know him or anything else. They just passed the craft on I-77, November 2nd, 1966.
And this comes out in the movie. I mean, the movie left out a lot of stuff in the book, but actually the part about Indrid Cold actually did make it into the movie.
Right, but the way it was used probably wasn't very factual.
Here we are at the Willow Island plant, Zytec. Where are we? North of Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Yeah, about 15 miles north of Parkersburg on Route 2, which follows the river.
Some of these plants are nuclear. Some of them are not guarded very well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it's such a terrorist concern nowadays, but it should have been back in the 60s when all these UFOs were flying over them. Yeah. This is definitely a visited area, a repeatedly visited area.
We're on Route 2. Route 2, weren't you saying Route 2?
Yeah, Route 2, we're about 15 miles north of Parkersburg, and Route 2 follows the Ohio River.
All the way up West Virginia?
All the way up West Virginia, and it actually follows back down into Point Pleasant. And back in the 60s when all these sightings were taking place, most of the course of what was seen followed Route 2. Exactly followed the river.
One of the things I wanted to mention before I forget is that my niece told me yesterday that she woke up one night and there was a caped winged figure, she called it like a bat with its wings wrapped around it, hanging from her ceiling with its face about 2 inches from her face. So we're continuing our drive up Route 2 north on West Virginia, but on the West Virginia side of the Ohio River. Here we are at St. Mary's.
St. Mary's is a site of numerous sightings from November 1966 to December 1967 of what they call the globe lights. A lot of the residents that lived along the river would see nightly, like clockwork, between 8:30 every single night, the globes start to follow the river. And this is just something that's really common in the UFO phenomenon, where you see balls of light. And there are certainly hundreds of witnesses here.
Well, we're still in St. Mary's, but I just wanted to throw this out because I looked at the map, and noticed that the Elk River starts in eastern West Virginia near Green Bank, where there is an observatory, which is actually pretty close to Sugar Grove, by the way. So keep that in mind. Now, when someone is confronted with the Mothman, it's sort of like a Buddhist test. They're shown this horrible thing, and if they're repelled by it or attracted by it, it's bad. What they have to do is just sort of look at it, realize that it's there to teach them something, and take that teaching with
there to lead you to that integration, to the integration of that unconscious, and provides an opportunity, a great opportunity for people to experience spiritual growth. And that is why he is the protector. Allows you to build your own protective spiritual force field. And again, Spider-Man does this in New York, Mothman does this in the mountains of West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, maybe.
Well, here we are in Sistersville, West Virginia.
Oh, and Sistersville has an interesting paranormal history, because it all started in 1897 with the great airship sightings, which were mainly in Texas, but there's recorded history of an airship sighting here in Sistersville. And in the spring of 1967, there was a Mothman sighting here, and all during the time from November 66 to December 1967, UFOs, globes of light, and everything were seen here. Hundreds of witnesses, all documented.
What was the airship, the 1897 airship, what were those airships like? Can you describe them?
Yeah, because most of the witnesses in Texas, and there's lots of recorded history about this in old newspapers in Texas, believe that they saw a cigar-shaped object land. And supposedly in Texas, one of these airships crashed, and there was actually an alien buried, given a Christian burial. But when that grave was dug back up, it had already been robbed.
One of the things you notice about these towns that had significant sightings was that they often have strong Masonic orders.
Yeah, most every town we've been in has an Eastern Star, which is the women's side of the Masonic Lodge, and the Masonic Lodge. To me, that's just a little too much of a coincidence.
Well, every town has, a lot of towns have a Masonic lodges, but the interesting thing is that in Keel's, in one of Keel's talks, this isn't in the book, but in one of his talks he mentions that there are a lot of articles have been written about the fact that some people believe that secret societies have somehow interfaced with this phenomenon, and that they are the ones who go around in vans abducting people and doing genetic experiments and so forth, because it's some part of a ritual working.
Yeah, and two other authors that have touched on that are Kevin Randall and Jim Mars. They also believe the Masons are heavily involved somehow with the UFO phenomenon.
I don't know if I mentioned this before, but another thing my niece told me was that she has the same dream that I have about a train trestle, railroad tracks in St. Albans. And I have this dream a lot. Oftentimes my mother is there. But we were both shocked when she said, yeah, I always have this strange dream about St. Albans. And sure enough, I had the same dream, and we were talking about that. And then she talked to her mother, who also says that she has a similar dream about St. Albans. So we're kind of kicking around this theory that if you've seen the Mothman, or he's come into your life in some way, you have an interface with him, and we're wondering if wherever he materialized, certain spots, if there's an energy field there that we pick up on and perhaps are drawn to while we are in a dream state, or we astral project there, or we have some feeling, intuition, or knowledge about that spot, because something in us has been touched by this energy force.
I don't suppose I can buy it off your back. Thanks.
It's this list of that I was telling you about.
Oh, yeah.
So what did that guy? I didn't get all of it on the tape, but can you tell us what he said?
He said that sometime during the 80s that he saw a bright object. He couldn't tell any shape or anything. It was mostly bright lights.
And this is in Payton City, or we're near Payton City, right?
Right. That's what he said. And he was on his way to work, and that when he got to work, he was an hour late. And he'd never been late in his life.
Wow.
And he doesn't remember anything else.
And then there was more to the story, wasn't there?
Yeah, because he had a friend that thought he was basically BSing him, and he went out with a friend one night to another friend that lived near these power lines where he had seen this object the night before, and while they were out there, they all three saw the same object.
And now 20 years later, this guy is wearing a UFO shirt.
Yep, it sure was.
Another interesting thing is that right behind Harriet on the wall here is someone has a moth drawing. And on the opposite wall, we have the Native American theme popping up again.
This is the place where we met the UFO man, who had missing time. So as we leave the Payton City Tasty Freeze, Harriet is saying that her mothy senses are tingling.
Big time. I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. In fact, I know we stepped into the Twilight Zone. We weren't even going to stop here. And then to run into what we just ran into?
Okay, we're about a block away from the Payton City Tasty Freeze. We see that we are in Wetzel County. Wetzel County is, well, the name Wetzel is a name that shows up quite often in the UFO phenomenon, much more than any other. It's an unusual name anyway, but it shows up a lot in the paranormal world.
Yeah, that and about half a dozen other names have been mentioned frequently in Keel books, but Wetzel is definitely one of those names.
Here we are at the Bayer plant, New Martinsville. Not many people know that Bayer was the company that was the principal company in IG Farben who built the Nazi death camps in World War II. Bayer financed the building of the camps. And in fact, they manufactured the Cyclone B gas, which was used to gas the Jews, the Gypsies, everyone else, the Slavs. Isn't it great? They're here in West Virginia, helping us out in the Ohio Valley, providing jobs.
Just screen memories, that's all it is.
So a screen memory, could you explain that for people?
Well, that's when the aliens implant a memory into your subconscious to make you forget the whole experience. I mean, let's face it, it'd be pretty traumatic to have them come in and use you as a guinea pig.
But then a lot of people, after that dream, after they go into hypnotherapy or whatever, they realize that the original dream was actually about being abducted in a van by some guys in military uniforms.
That could be possible. That's true.
We are in the vicinity of the Blue Moon where Charles Manson's mom used to hang out. You're noticing some things here.
Yeah, major substation behind us.
We're looking at the substation back here. Okay.
And of course, all the power lines that lead into it.
Power lines up there.
And if you think about it, these would go real close to his house as well. And also, there's a gas line in here.
Big gas line.
And all indicative of electromagnetic fields, which is associated with the phenomena that we are researching.
Here we are at the Blue Moon parking lot. We're doing some remodeling.
This is Manson's old hangout.
This is where his mom broke off a bottle and stabbed a guy in the head with it.
And stole all of his money and had to leave the state.
She stole Charlie's money, but I guess, and then he beat her up, and then they went to Indiana together, where he ended up in reform school where he was raped and taught how to be a mind-controlled assassin.
And it all started right here.
There it is. Ye Old Blue Moon Tavern.
See that?
I saw that. The window is reacting to Harriet. Harriet said she felt weird. And whenever she says that, look at this. The window goes up and down. She's not touching. She's trying to close it. She just hit it. Okay, finally on the third try it works. We're passing Salt Lick State Park in Ohio. Last stop on the Mothman tour. Tell us about the significance of this place.
Okay, it's actually Salt Fork State Park.
Oh, Salt Fork, sorry.
Right, it's about 5 miles north of Cambridge, Ohio, and what is significant about it is that there have been 13 Bigfoot sightings here, spread out over probably 15 years.
A lot of people think that Bigfoot is seen the most in the Northwest, but that's actually not true, correct?
Right, actually, the state of Ohio has the highest number of sightings of any state.
And how many do they have a year?
Close to 100 that are actually investigated, and some of those are discarded, some of those aren't, but actually about 100 investigated sightings a year.
As you pass Salt Fork, what does your gut tell you?
There's some hairy man in the woods.
You're pretty interested in seeing a Bigfoot. How does it connect up with the Mothman?
Again, I've said this all along, all during this journey, that all this stuff is related. I think that it's just another way for these beings or whoever's visiting us to reach us and let us know that there's something else out there besides us.
What about the stories that Bigfoots are guardians of underground caverns where small robotic aliens mine minerals for alien use?
That is a prevalent theory in the UFO community, that's really true, because most of these Bigfoot sightings are seen with the UFO. In fact, about 60 to 70% of them, there's a UFO or some type of strange light occurrence every time one is seen in the area.
What about the psychic Sasquatch?
Well, you're more the expert on that than I am.
Well, I'll just say that there is a book called The Psychic Sasquatch, and there is at least one investigator, and there's actually several, but they haven't published, who believe that the Sasquatch is a psychic being who can move between dimensions, dematerialize, materialize, and that explains why you can find Bigfoot tracks in the snow and then the tracks disappear.
Yeah, and in fact, about half the sightings that I've read in the state of Ohio, that is the exact thing that people have said, that they'll see it and it actually dematerializes before their eyes. It doesn't like disappear off into the woods, it disappears right in front of their eyes.
Supposedly, if you come across a Sasquatch, it's usually by accident, because they usually don't want to approach you unless you've come there with a mindset to be kind to them and be a friend to them. They can read minds. Supposedly, they can read the human mind.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, because a lot of the UFO-related phenomena, they say it's supposedly the Mothman and all these other creatures, the Garuda, can read your mind, and also alien beings can read your mind. So that doesn't surprise me.
Well, the Mothman Tour 2002 continues here at the Weed Rest Area, my favorite rest area in the entire nation. Actually, I'm really here because in the distance we have Mount Shasta. How does Mount Shasta tie in with the Mothman? Well,
It probably doesn't. But Mothman Prophecies author John Keel came here recently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and spent some time on the slopes of Mount Shasta looking for the paranormal. It was documented in a film whose title I can't quite remember at the moment, but this film is available. It's a documentary, and it's basically a film about Keel, his life, his messy New York apartment, his road trip out to Mount Shasta. I'm not sure what all he found here. All I know is that I'm on my way to San Francisco to continue the Mothman Tour 2002 by following Harriet as she goes through a month-long intensive hypnotherapy certification program, where she feels that some things will come out about the Mothman, her past, maybe some repressed memories. Some things will come out that will be essential to understanding her story and her connection to the Mothman. So, onward we go.
Mothman Tour 2002 continues in Marin County, California, home of the ultimate yuppies. And we have completed day one of Harriet's hypnotherapy training. Tell us about what happened today.
Well, we got hypnotized twice today. First time was just a light induction. The second time was into a heavy trance. And during that heavy trance, I took off and went flying.
Saw lots of colors and saw something mountainside with a door in the side of it. I have no idea what that was about.
You were remote viewing an installation, perhaps?
Perhaps, maybe Hamilton Field. That's why I want to go to Hamilton Field and see.
What would you say out there to those who are wondering what the connection is between the Mothman and hypnotherapy?
I'd say they're right on track. Obviously, we're both drawn to hypnotherapy. I mean, there has to be a reason, and I say Mothman's the reason.
So
I've only had one beer.
what about marketing? Would you be willing to market Mothman products?
Oh, sure.
So you feel that your hairdresser might be involved?
Yeah, I do. I mean, not necessarily with us, but at some point in his life, I think he may have had some kind of encounter because he has become obsessed with reading about all this stuff since he found out about the two of us.
You feel like hairdressers, Mothman experiencers, abductees make better hairdressers?
Oh, absolutely.
Why?
No doubt. Because they're more open to weirder hairstyles and experimenting.
Add to your collection.
It's kind of hard to see in the...
Yeah, the sunlight. Yeah, just,
Well, here we are, end of second day hypnotherapy training, and we find ourselves at Hamilton Field. Tell us about Hamilton Field.
Well, first and foremost, I should tell you my father was stationed here in the Air Force, and it's something that he never really talked about again, one of those deals. Hamilton Field is supposed to have an underground area that houses crashed alien vehicles as well as alien bodies. And this was documented in the early 1970s by children that lived around here and then later wrote a book. And by the way, the person that leaked that information is now dead.
We came here today because today you had a special hypnosis session where you saw some things.
Right, I actually went flying again. This is the second time I went flying out of my body. And for some reason I flew here, and as we stop here, this is where I came up over the edge of this ridge up here. And this
So you
is
were
it.
flying, you were sort of floating over this area.
Right.
Out of body.
Out of body. And also, we have not crossed the ridge, so I do not know what's on the other side, but I will tell you now what is on the other side from what I saw today. We saw tanker refuelers, I believe KC-135s and KC-10s, which are refueling aircraft that fuel other Air Force vehicles and aircraft. And what you're going to find on this other side is Air National Guard base, not active Air Force, but there is still an underground installation that is active Air Force and restricted.
And these are just things that you saw today.
During hypnosis.
During hypnosis.
Yeah.
And I have to add here that yesterday, when we were doing a hypnosis, as Harriet was seeing Hamilton Field, she didn't know what it was. She was seeing other parts of it or something, some other part of the hills here. When she was doing that, I felt a sudden flash of bright light, and I too saw these very hills. It was like I was flying over them. And it was like intrusive on what I was doing a hypnosis about my artwork, and then suddenly, boom! There's this flash of light, and I'm floating over what looks like these hills right here. And it was out of context, but so I feel like maybe because Harriet and our heads were close together, that I somehow, or maybe proximity doesn't really matter, but for some reason I picked up on what she was seeing, or vice versa.
I agree. I think one of us picked up something off the other one. And I think we're both seeing the same thing, and I think just seeing this kind of proves it.
Anything familiar?
Yeah, that skinny tower right there that's checked with sort of a rusted white color. I saw that when I was flying today during hypnosis, and I thought it was kind of strange, and I kind of dismissed it because it looks like a skinny water tower. And I thought it should be fatter, and I just kind of dismissed it. And then when I saw it, I recognized it immediately.
Wait a minute, now you're saying you saw a church.
I saw a church when I was flying, and I discounted it because I thought it odd that a church that looks like this would be on a military installation, but there it is.
Technical note, we can't show the church because we've now moved a little further down this one-way road, and we're not supposed to be in here. It's unauthorized. So we kind of need to get on going. But here's the old Army Reserve Center. Get a shot of that.
Wow, look at that. It's just beautiful. Thinking is on that.
Okay, now you're instructing me to drive a certain spot here.
Right, and then to look off to your left
What-
and look up toward the hillside, because you described to me a vision that came to you about a crater or a clearing, and I see something that could be similar, and I'm just curious if this is what you saw.
Okay, here we go. Here we have the church.
Bigger than a watch, there it is. That's what I flew over.
So now we're moving toward the area that has the underground area.
Yeah, it's in the hillside that we initially photographed on the way coming in here. It's at the far end of the base and is removed from what's now what I perceive to be a Air National Guard base.
Here's one of the old hangars at Hamilton Field. Now we're wondering why the Coast Guard needs a strike team. What just happened?
I thought I saw someone literally no more than 50 feet from me, and it's just a flash, but it was a flash of a man, and all I can tell you is we're sitting under some high tension lines.
As we were rounding the corner, before we saw these towers, Harriet said she was tingling. Boom, there it is. Photography is a tool to bridge the subconscious and conscious minds. Okay, well, we've had our 4th day of hypnotherapy certification training. Taking a little break here today, and we find ourselves in the East Bay area, up in the mountains here. We think we found a little intelligence agency village. What's it called?
Orinda.
Orinda. Here we have, we note the irony here of these two buildings, two facilities located across the street from each other. They are the JFK University. Did you know there was one? I didn't. And across the street, the Orinda Masonic Center. A lot of people say, Harriet, that if you look at the JFK assassination, there's a lot of Masonic symbols in it.
Yep.
Interesting that we find these two connected here again in
Yep.
Orinda, California.
Yeah, I think that this is a CIA recruitment center, and I think that what they do is they pick kids out of this university and they brainwash them.
Along the lines of brainwashing, would you like to talk about yesterday's events, the 4th day?
Yeah.
Give us the goods, babe.
Well, okay. Andy hypnotized me yesterday, and what we talked about in one of the sessions was healthy relationships with food, because it's something that we're going to encounter a lot as hypnotherapists. And Andy programmed me, evidently. I really don't know, because I'm a somnambulist. I was out, gone. I can hear his voice, kind of, but I can't hear what he's saying to me. All I know is I walked twice, I've done crunches twice, and I have an extreme urge to buy salads and piece chicken and not eat any bread. And I have, like I said, I have no idea what he said to me, but all this stuff has happened.
I also, as master programmer, no, just kidding. I also gave her a mystery programming, which I think was responsible for her having such a good night's sleep last night. I'm not going to reveal it yet until some more things happen, but it's definitely sleep related, or it has a connection to sleep. So we'll see how that goes. Anything else?
Not at this time.
Well, what was the first? We had another.
No, we did a rapid
meditation.
induction. We did a rapid induction outside when we went outside, just to see how quick we'd get each other under, and that worked very well.
Now, something that happened to me, I'll just mention because I mentioned it to Harriet earlier, was I had a dream that I've always had this long-standing dream. It's probably my best dream, where I feel really great afterwards. I'm on top of a mountain. There's a special light. It's like being in heaven. There's sort of buildings made of light and things. And I was able to take that quality of light from that dream during our meditation or our hypnosis session and place that light in a memory of mine, a real memory, where I was playing at my family farm when I was a kid. So
I'm hoping that, it seems like that was a breakthrough of some kind where I'm now able to visualize that beautiful healing light in a real time in my life, in a real place, and perhaps bring that more into the present by starting with the past and working forward. So, looking forward to that.
Oh, that's a good one.
Animals, little people in fur coats.
So, day 5, hypnotherapy training. Tell us about it.
Perhaps the most important thing we did today was have a guy by the name of Lynn Hilliard come in, who's Hawaiian, and taught us the huna form of shamanism. It's just native to Hawaii, and it's universal philosophy, very consistent with what we're learning anyway. But what was so dramatic for both of us was we had 2 group hypnosis, and in my case, in the first one, he had us visualize our bodies filling with light from the toes to the head, and once we reached the head, I exited the head. My body, or my soul, my consciousness left my physical being, and I went flying. I remember nothing except sensations of flying. And then later,
didn't we sort of dream of the same place or see the same place?
We did, but I couldn't remember that until I started having flashbacks afterward. At the time, I can't say that I consciously remember where I was. But typically, what happens when I go that deep in trance is when I come out of it, then I start to remember. I'll have imprints of what really happened. And what was so interesting was we were both describing the same place with the rolling hills, the vivid color, a brushiness to it, roads that led deep into those hills. It was pretty amazing, really.
I think it's an alternate Woodward Drive.
I do too. That's what it looks like.
So tell us about the second meditation that we did with the shaman.
Oh gosh, the second meditation was really neat.
Tell people like where he took us, or sort of what the journey was about.
What this journey was about, he wanted us to realize that we're healers. Basically, in a nutshell, what he did for me was he validated my existence. He took us to our safe place, the place we had to go up a path, through a door, through an opening, into a place that we felt was safe of our choosing. And then he led us from that place down a path onto a tropical beach, which my impression of that is Hawaii, although I had never been there, and it's probably the fact that he's Hawaiian. And then he took us through a lagoon, off this beach.
It was a dolphin ride, wasn't it?
No, he had us on a canoe, an ocean-going vessel is what he called it.
I was riding with dolphins, sorry.
Okay. And this is what's so weird, and I could feel going through the waves. I could feel the sensations of my body going up and down through these waves, and he had us rowed to another island where meeting us at the other island was a healer, a master healer, who he had the master healer place his hand on our hearts and give to us the gifts of compassion, love, and healing. And that's what we left with and took back with us, and we went back to our lagoon and then back to our sacred place and absorbed all that in the moment. It's like I said, he validated my whole existence.
What was the symbol or the gift that he gave you?
Well, in my perception of it, it was nothing concrete.
Nothing concrete?
It was nothing concrete. It was the abstract ability to heal. But I guess a little more, he gave me the knowing of it, the absolute knowing that I own that, rather than the feeling that I want to do that, the absolute knowing that I own that. It's something that I can do.
I have to concur, and also just throw in my gift, what I received. It actually started a few months ago when I was in Mexico with a shaman who put me through a sweat lodge and then gave us all a gift of a burning flower, or a flower which I later saw as burning that night in my mind as I was trying to go to sleep, which I told him about, and he said he verified, or I asked him what sort of flower it was. I knew it was a lotus, and he verified, well, it was a lotus. So I knew that there was something real to that. And then today I went back to that shaman, as he was sort of the master healer in my dream, part of him, and I received the lotus again and I was trying to make that lotus come to life in my mind the way it did the first time. And it wouldn't, of course, do that. It came in a different way, which was I saw these. It's going to sound really strange, but I've always had dreams of glowing Bigfoots around my house back in West Virginia, and so since the area around my house in West Virginia is sort of my garden, I go back there, and this time I saw the burning Bigfoots as burning lotuses, which is just, I have no idea why that is, but they all became burning lotuses. And if anyone who knows anything about Buddhism knows that the burning lotus is the seat of enlightenment, and it just felt like I was looking at enlightenment, or that enlightenment had in fact visited me earlier, and that I was being reintroduced to that again through this other person, through these other shamans that I've met. It was really powerful. Okay, so day 7, is that right?
Yeah.
Day 7, we're going to do a little recap here. Some interesting things have happened. One of the things that happened today was the pain relief session, hypnotherapy that we did. Tell us about that.
Well, I had a huge knot in my shoulder, and I mean, this is no strange thing to me, because when I'm having some type of problem emotionally, or I'm feeling stress or whatever, I get knots like in my right shoulder. They're as huge as your fist. You can actually physically see them. And unfortunately, one of my favorite cousins dropped dead 2 days ago of a heart attack at the age of 40, and I've been devastated by the grief, and the grief manifested itself as a knot. And we did something called glove anesthesia, where you take a client and you try to let the arm go numb by visualizing a band up by the shoulder and a band on the wrist to tighten it off and make the arm go numb. And then the therapist will place the hand on the chest and then direct the numbness to wherever the pain is in the body. And in this case, I don't even remember Andy dropping me down. I know I dropped down real quick, and I do remember him placing my hand on my chest, but after that I got a feeling of nausea. I mean, I instantly felt like I was going to throw up, and then I felt heat, just an intense heat. I broke out in an enormous sweat, like a hot flash, and felt that heat go back through my body, through my solar plexus to my back, and then take the pain and numb it all the way down, and the knot is gone. And then the only thing that snapped me out of it, Andy didn't bring me out of it, I snapped out of it myself because I was going to vomit. And I understand that to be the feelings of grief surfacing and me dispelling of them, because that's symbolically what that knot was about.
Something I wanted to mention today, or about today, was that I've been I had this vision of a flame in my mind, which I think I mentioned before when I was in Mexico with the Sweat Lodge shaman. And then it turns out that the last hypnosis we did today, sort of the coup de grace, was a violet flame hypnosis, which is actually a modernization of a Tibetan initiation, where the Buddhists meditate on the after-death state, so that because the violet flame is the first flame that comes up after death, which most people turn away from because it's too frightening. So they end up, the theory is each of these lights comes to you in the afterlife, and then the longer you wait, the more comforting the lights become. But unfortunately, the longer you wait, to pick a light, to choose a light, sort of the lower you go in the realm that you're reborn into. So if you choose a very comforting light after death, you may come back in a very uncomfortable life situation in the birth that you have next. So the reason for this meditation is to get the monks ready for the violet, the first light, and to accept it, because it leads to enlightenment, or to not having to come back in a body. So this whole time I've been speculating that there was something Tibetan about the Mothman phenomenon, and I just felt it. And then it turns out that the phenomenon has led us to this initiation into a Tibetan secret rite, which is really one of the most important things you could ever do as a practicing Buddhist or a spiritual person, is to try to meditate on the afterlife and figure out what you're going to do with it and prepare yourself for it. Now, anything else that came up for you? Did you want to talk about the traumas that you were telling me about? Some of the aneurysms, births, heart attacks, and things that you've come upon? Because emergency pain relief was the other meditation we did today.
Right, we did, and it's interesting because Marlene brought up the point: don't ever go searching for these things. It's okay to help as a person, but not as a hypnotherapist, or say that you're a hypnotherapist in these situations. And I guess one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me in my life, it's a recurrent theme, I guess, that led me to see that I was a healer, is I always tend to land in these situations. I don't go out looking for them, I land in them. I've delivered 2 babies. I was with someone when they had an aneurysm that nearly killed them, and was able to tell the doctors in the emergency room what was actually wrong with this man, and tell them, after they'd put him in isolation thinking he'd had some weird disease, tell them that it's something in the brain, it's an aneurysm, and I showed them where it was, and of course they thought I was an idiot, and when they did the scan, it was exactly where I said it was. I've been with 2 people that have had heart attacks, and the only reason I was there is to help them.
And you knew what to do.
I knew what to do instinctively, and I can just think of this incident where I had someone chew an aspirin long before that ever became popular as a form for someone not dying. I said to the man, I said, chew this aspirin, I can guarantee you one thing: you will not die. And the man was conscious the entire time, he never lost consciousness, and my hands went to his...
You put him under hypnosis.
Yes, I mean, I understand.
You gave him
now.
a suggestion to not die.
And I went for his pinky, and I squeezed it on either side, and with my other hand, I went down to the 4th vertebrae of his neck and applied pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And not knowing at the time that is, in Qigong, how you stop a heart attack. It will stop a heart attack in progress. And I had no idea this until I read it much later, that that's what I had done. My hands were directed there.
And didn't you deliver a baby once in your jazzercise class?
Yes, I did. And of course, I had not had a child myself at that point, and I really knew nothing, and I knew instinctively what to do. The baby came before the squad did.
And what's happening with your sleepwalking? Because I gave you a suggestion to begin to integrate awareness into your sleepwalking, and it turns out you sleptwalked last night. I
indeed did. I slept like a rock last night, which typically is unusual for me, but I had listened to a Gil Boyne tape before I went to bed that produced restful sleep. And I found myself last night, what I thought was in a dream state, walking through my hotel room, which is it's an apartment, and toward the kitchen window, and I saw myself walk out the kitchen window, right through the wall, everything. Don't remember anything, but I also felt that I came back through, and when I came back through, I woke up. I was actually standing in the kitchen area, and woke up and realized I was sleepwalking, and before I don't think I would have realized that. I was actually conscious that I had sleptwalked, so the suggestion worked.
Plus, your cousin died a couple of days ago, and you knew that something wrong had gone.
Oh, yeah. I started, and Andy can attest to this, I started acting funny in the middle of the evening. Started to have just weird feelings and just got really quiet and solemn because something didn't feel right in the air, but I didn't express it because I couldn't express it. I didn't know what was happening. And turns out that I sat bolt upright in bed this morning at 5:02, and after talking to another cousin, found out that he died about 5 o'clock in the morning. And Andy had talked about the night before, which was the night that Michael actually died, that he woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, chest pains.
I can attest. This is my affidavit. I did wake up at 5 in the morning. The only time this entire class, which is about a week and a half now, that I've woken up in the middle of the night, couldn't go back to sleep. And I suspect that I was picking up vibes from the situation somehow. I also had a vision of a van and somebody being carried out of a van which was out of nowhere. And then I mentioned, and the initial word on Harriet's cousin was that he had died in a car, and I think he has a van. So we suspected that I had gotten a vision of his van. It turns out, and this is the way the subconscious works, is that was the story that was going around about him, but in truth he had actually died in his sleep. But the van had been a story that was circulated, and somehow I had picked up on that.
Trying to keep his tail dry. We're almost at the end of our hypnosis days, Harriet.
Yeah,
We've
how
run
about
into a
that?
couple of strange people in class.
Yeah, we have. But one of the strangest stories that I've heard so far is a guy from Britain in our class by the name of Kevin Love. And Kevin had his own UFO sighting in the Portsmouth, England area and told me all about it. And take it away, Kevin.
Kevin Love.
Kevin Louvre.
Kevin Love.
Hello.
What are you doing?
What do
You
you
saw
want?
a UFO
Yes, I did.
in Portsmouth, England. Tell
Yes,
us
I
about
did.
it briefly.
Briefly, I was driving to the cinema with my friend, and there was a lot of commotion either side of the motorway, and we happened to look up for some reason, and there it was in all its glory. It looked kind of weird. It was really long, and at first we thought it was a low flying aircraft or something, but we noticed it had no wings, and it was beveled in at the sides, so it looked like a big bone, really. And we slowed down to about 30 miles an hour on the motorway, and we noticed the police were lined up either side, and they were all out their cars looking up into the sky. And so we were looking up, but we couldn't stop because we weren't allowed to. And so I just kept an eye on it, being the passenger in the car, and it sort of shifted and went out over the water because the motorway ran alongside the water, and it went out to the water and stopped, and it was really weird. I kept my eye on it, and it sort of seemed to change shape into a great big sphere. It must have been about a mile out to sea, and it changed into a big sphere, and it was just like the moonlight on it, and then it just shot up until we couldn't see it anymore, directly up, and that was it. And it was gone, and there was nothing in the national press, nothing on local or national TV, but one local paper had printed photographs about it, and that's all I saw. But that was about 5 days after the incident happened, and that was it.
Analysis?
Analysis. Well, definitely what Kevin observed is something that happens quite a bit in the changing of shapes of UFOs. At first times, a lot of people will cite it as one shape, and the shape will actually change, and that's something that he witnessed. And actually, this sighting is very well known. It happened approximately 7 years ago, 1995, 1996, somewhere in there, in the Portsmouth, England area, and there were actually hundreds of witnesses. It's mentioned in Kevin Randall's books.
Were there any other effects, like people having psychic abilities?
That I don't know, but there was some illness associated with people that were actually closer to it, and that's why I had asked Kevin if he...
Any illnesses,
No.
psychic
No,
phenomenon?
nothing like that at all. No, not for me.
Not anybody that you heard of after it?
No, I didn't actually meet anyone else that had seen it or admitted to seeing it. I thought it was just, me and my friend, but obviously everyone on the motorway and all the police were making a fuss about it. So, that was the last I heard of it.
Did it have any impact on your life, like changing your direction in terms of seeing something that seemed unbelievable and how that impacted you?
It just sort of cemented my beliefs, really, because I believed in stuff like that, and I've got a pretty broad view of things, and to see it was, it was brilliant. I loved it. I wasn't scared. I was just interested, and I wanted to get out and follow the thing, whatever it was. But obviously couldn't do that. But yeah, it was good.
Now there were a couple of other interesting things that came up yesterday from other people in the class. Can you tell us about those?
A woman by the name of Leah Shapiro, who is in our class, has a book on psychic channeling. She's some kind of medium. She's from the Palm Springs, California area. And in class, she just happened to mention that she had appeared on a couple radio shows, one in Seattle, I think one in Arizona, one in California, and had talked about her book and had talked about being a channel or a medium for the Palladians, and had talked about this extreme interference every time that she tried to speak on radio, and it was just really weird. And it was odd because it was so out of context with what we were speaking about at the time in class.
And wasn't her ex-husband CIA?
Her ex-husband was a CIA embassy chief.
Did she know what he was up to?
Pretty much. She also worked for the CIA herself at one point, and they were stationed in places like Kenya. In fact, they were in Kenya when the bombing took place.
This ties in with our I guess it's a hobby, you might say. When you go to things like this, you kind of try to figure out who's the CIA informant, and in this case, we may have found her. But there's another guy who also could be the one. And tell us about him, Sammy.
Oh my gosh, Sammy. Sammy is from Modesto, California. Don't know his last name. And very interesting man. He was a local policeman, but also he just, out of context, again yesterday, happens to mention that he worked in military decoding.
And he also has some heavy Christian beliefs, which you see a lot in CIA operatives.
Right, and he argued with one of our speakers, Igor Weiss, because Igor is from Romania, has a lot of Eastern Bloc type of thought thinking, and kind of put down the Bible in Sammy's mind, and Sammy just stopped him point blank and argued with him right there in class.
I mean, this is post 9/11. You can't have people going around, questioning the Western ways.
Yeah, and it's like I said, a lot of people were real touchy about this guy from Romania and really didn't like him at all, but Sammy's the only one that really spoke up.
This guy from Romania, wasn't he a student of Stanislav Grof?
He was, and he himself is a psychiatrist, an MD, here in Southern California, and he teaches this holotropic breathing method that Grof originated.
And he taught at Esalen, didn't
he? He did, yeah.
Esalen, for those of you not familiar with it, was a great gathering place, think tank, you might say, for New Age thought during the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. I guess it's still around.
Still around, and what it attracts is a lot of Eastern Bloc type people. A lot of Russians are there, Romanians, Bulgarians, what have you. And we have a very large contingent of Russians in our class, and they're all familiar. They all sat there shaking their heads with everything he was saying.
The Russians were always sort of ahead of the U.S. in terms of psychic research, which is why in the Mothman story, you have these guys cropping up who seem like they're from Siberia, look like they're maybe from Mongolia, or that could be the reason why. We don't know yet for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy, because when you have a class of 50 people and 5 or 6 of them are Russians, it's kind of odd.
This is what Harriet saw during her holotropic breathing session. We've got herself in the middle and these other things. This would be your Indian guide. Does he have a name?
No, he has never appeared with
one. Here's our UFO alien from Woodward Drive. these are my eyes with the UFO sparkler phenomenon happening there. Here we have the Scottish Mothman and Scottish alien. Here we have the Sugar Grove alien tree and the Irish alien. Here we have the alien who heals prostate conditions. This would be your disembodied Mothman vampire thing. Clustered aliens growing on the vine. Superhero Mothman thing. Alien chest. Alien with braces. Well, here we are at the Oregon Vortex. The Mothman Tour 2002 is drawing to a close. I'm on my way back from San Francisco with my certificate. Let's see, where's that thing? Right here in my spiral notebook. Hypnotherapy. I am now a certified hypnotherapist, capable of performing shamanism if you're a Democrat, shamanism if you're a Republican. And I thought it was appropriate here to visit the Vortex, which is a place where weightlessness occurs. People get disoriented. It's a real vortex. This is a major attraction here in Oregon. So here's some shots of what happens in the vortex. The guy on the left appears smaller. I saw a documentary about this on the Discovery Channel. I don't quite understand it all, but apparently it's this whole 3/4 of an acre that's the vortex, so we are in the vortex right now because I'm right next to the House of Mystery, which stands at the center of the vortex. Things like you can hold like 2 wires lightly and they will pull themselves together in front of your eyes. Things roll backwards. It's a bizarre gravitational field. They don't do the best job of explaining it in the flyer, but they told me I could take 2, so I'm taking 2 of these. Well, the Mothman Tour 2002 continues. Even though I thought it was over at Mount Shasta, I'm back. And I have with me energy field expert, psychic Sharon, to tell us about our current position here in Maple Valley, Washington. What's it known for?
It's known for its many cattle mutilations.
Do you have any energy readings here? Do you feel the vortex of any kind?
Ominous.
Could there be a Batsquatch? You know, we're coming up on Mount Rainier soon.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that that's the only sighting of Batsquatch? And it was on the slopes of Mount Rainier?
I didn't know that.
For those of you that don't know Batsquatch, Batsquatch is a flying Bigfoot that was seen in 1997, I think, here. As we approach Mount Rainier, we're going to see if we can find. Now, there's rumors of a peg-legged Batsquatch. Now, there have been sightings of peg-legged Bigfoots. I'm serious about this. There's never been a sighting of a peg-legged Batsquatch. There's only been one sighting of a Batsquatch. Period. So if we were able to see something like that today, we would be breaking totally new ground in the paranormal sciences. By the way, the Mason's Lodge here in Maple Valley is most accommodating. They guarantee 100% customer satisfaction when you go to their lodge for whatever it is that they do at their lodge. What did you say? Say that again.
Probably cattle mutilations.
Well, it's funny that Sharon mentions that, because in the UFO literature, in fact, John Keel's talked about this in some of his talks, is that the Masons have been suspected. Well, not the Masons. He didn't name which secret society it was, but there is a history of secret societies being involved in alien abduction and possibly cattle mutilations, because there is such a correlation between the two things.
They are a branch of old Jewish mysticism, which did animal sacrifice. So, you know, Solomon's temple, all these things are all, you know, they're branches off of those secret societies, which they did animal sacrifice. So maybe that's how.
Well, Sharon's tapped into, you know, a really dangerous topic, which is anything having to do with Judaic beliefs. So I'll have to edit that out if I want my documentary to be shown in Hollywood. I will edit that out. Here is the official Batsquatch website. Were Charlie Manson and Sarah Jane Moore products of government mind control or occult paranormal forces? Or both? Is the Mothman still manifesting in the lives of people from the Ohio Valley? These are questions that remain open. In Harriet's case, her family continues to be contacted on a regular basis by different energetic forces: ghosts, poltergeists, aliens, globes of light, sparkler type things that float outside. Harriet finds herself outside or in bed with grass on her feet. Recently, her son Jay experienced a phenomenon where he felt as if his toe was being pulled by an unseen being, while another being whispered in his ear, "Come with us, come with us." And this event happened twice in a row in exactly the same way, as if it was almost a program from the universe playing itself out. One of the interesting things that comes up about the pulling of the toes is that it's also mentioned in this book by Martin Prechtel called The Secrets of the Talking Jaguar, a Mayan Shaman's Journey. Spirits do apparently like to grab or pull on people's toes, so if it happens, just say no. N-O. One thing that I wanted to bring out was that since the end of the Mothman tour, which was in October of 2002, a couple of other things happened that were interesting. One was that there was a Mothman sighting in Alaska, several actually. When I talked to Harriet about this, she predicted that there would be an earthquake and that the Mothman was showing up because he was trying to warn people of the earthquake. 2 days later, there was a 3.7 earthquake in Alaska. Another thing that happened was that Harriet went back for a week-long refresher course in California for hypnotherapy in November. And while she was there, she and two other witnesses saw, and I guess along with hundreds or thousands of other San Franciscans, saw what looked like a missile get shot out of the sky by a laser beam from above. This theory was debunked in the media, and it was said that it was a simple missile hitting another missile out over the water, and that it was a test of our missile defense system. 2 weeks later, however, the Army, in a separate article, a little small article in the back of the newspaper, admitted that it had recently tested a laser cannon at one of its facilities in New Mexico. Speaking of New Mexico, one of the things that happened during the reunion was that Harriet predicted that I would speak with a person from the military at my reunion, that she had had a vision of that. Well, that night, I met a former student friend who was an Army doctor. And, that seemed to fulfill the vision, but there was more to it. In fact, when I asked him where he lived, he said he lived on a certain street in El Paso, Texas, which is right across the border from New Mexico, where I once lived. And it turns out that he lives on the same block as my wife's uncle. And he told me a story of how his son the birth of his son was brought about by a curandera, who is sort of a female shaman, and that they were able to have a connection with the spirit and bring it into the body of their child in a controlled manner. And this was the same sort of instinctive feeling that I had about the birth of my own son. To be honest, we were having a little trouble conceiving, and there was a point at which I definitely felt as if we had called upon some forces that could help that process go along, and it did have something to do with the Mothman, Harriet, West Virginia. Clearly, as I started this process, it seemed to open up those energies. The other little interesting thing was that Harriet had a dream about a pentagram, and then the next day I sent her an email telling her about a theory that the DC sniper was using a pentagram over Washington, DC to sort of map out his killings. And she was blown away by that. And it turned out that when the sniper was finally caught, he was actually someone I had met at the gymnasium in my neighborhood, because the mosque that he attended is right around the corner from my house, and he attended the gym, the YMCA, right down the street. Okay, and now for the big climax. Once I got back to Seattle in November, I took some courses in Tibetan energy healing. After I had a session with a master in this particular healing method, I had an experience of my memory clearing up in certain areas, and certain memories came back very clearly that I'd completely forgotten about. One of those memories was the content of the vision that Tommy and I had seen in 1966 when we made our blood brother handshake, and we had built our Mothman shrine, and he had seen some aliens, and we had decided that we would get back together and find each other in the year 2001, and that we would trade back our shrunken heads. Well, as we made this blood brother pact, we both saw a vision, and the vision was of the world in 2001. It was a vision of a city, and my interpretation of it was that it was New York. It was the biggest city, I knew of. But this vision of New York flashed into our minds, and it looked like it was being destroyed, like being bombed. There were buildings on fire. Now, I had no real place to put this in my mind, so I just forgot about it. But we clearly saw an event that looked a lot like 911. It didn't look exactly the same. The buildings weren't built yet, so I really didn't. It's hard to know exactly what buildings I saw being destroyed. It could have been the Twin Towers. Now, since I put this information out that I had this vision of destruction of 911, I've had conspiracy theorists write me asking questions like, well, did you know that NASA has developed remote flying techniques for airplanes? They can basically fly a huge jet anywhere they like without any pilots at all. And other conspiracy theorists saying that, well, there's no evidence that these hijackers, really existed. Obviously, some of the identities were faked or stolen. Maybe there weren't any hijackers, and maybe this was all a NASA kind of operation. which sounded crazy. And then, what can you say to that stuff? But then other calls came in. One fellow describing how the nexus of the 911 terror operation was in Florida, near NASA headquarters, near where my friend Tommy works, or used to work before he retired. Another fellow tells me that NASA has secured a large contract to develop all of the new airport screening devices that can screen for not only smells and bombs, but can also measure the person's stress levels to indicate whether or not they might be planning a terrorist operation. Perhaps we will find out someday that other children had this vision via the Mothman phenomenon of destruction in 2001, each with his own response to that stimuli.
We believe there are no coincidences in this world. We believe there are no coincidences in this world.
Something from the other side changed my life forever. What I experienced as a child was 2 paranormal sightings, 1 paranormal visitation. The people were afraid. Ultimately, it couldn't be stopped.
There's no coincidence that you're listening to this program right now when you're looking for depth and insight into your life.
If people were afraid, well, who cares, you know? Couldn't be stopped. Seeing something from the other side, from another dimension, changed my life forever. Someone had seen a moth, a tree that suddenly expanded its wings out. The Mothman sighting was seen more than once. Someone had seen a moth, couldn't be stopped.
There is no coincidence that you're listening and wanting to have a greater wisdom and understanding of your place in this world.
If people were afraid, top secret government. The Mothman sighting, ultimately, it couldn't be stopped. Changed my life forever.